Welcome to First Wednesday Real Estate Investment Club meeting. Really excited about this meeting. We have a very special guest. I'm going to read her introduction and we're going to jump right into it. But I warn you guys, you should get a pen and paper ready because there's going to be a lot of great insights about house flipping. All right. Introduction. Cher Castillo is associate broker at Compass Real Estate and the co-founder of Infinity Capital Group. She's known as the Flip Queen DC. With over 35 successful projects under her belt, she has gained diverse knowledge on all aspects of real estate, sales, development, and design. Her most recent accomplishment includes the launching of flipqueendc.com, where you can preview her development projects, learn more about her investment consulting services, and watch her real estate blog. Cher has won the Washingtonian Magazine Top Realtor Award for 7 consecutive years, the Wall Street Journal Top Agent Award for 3 consecutive years, and the Compass Top Team Award 2 years in a row. Cher will be leading us through a presentation she created called Flipping 101, in which she will simplify the house flipping process from start to finish. After her presentation, there will be a Q&A session in which Cher will respond to any questions you may have about real estate. So I am grateful to have with us Cher Castillo.
Well, thank you for that warm introduction, Lance. I'm happy to be here and teach you all that I know about flipping, which, my career started about 10 years ago in flipping and about 17 years ago in real estate altogether. So I've learned quite a bit along the way and always excited to share that with people I know. So getting started, the first part of the presentation, putting puzzle pieces together in house flipping is a good way to take some of these nuggets and, some of these words you may be familiar with, some of them you may not. Throughout the presentation, I'll explain many of these if you don't already know, but the ARV stands for the after renovated value. Hard money is money that is loaned from a private lender, typically for very high interest rates. And rehabbing is taking a property and renovating it, whether it's a small cosmetic renovation to a full gut renovation. A gut job is also part of rehabbing, but it's where you take a house or condo or property down to the bones, so to the studs, so to speak. So you rip everything out. Staging is after you've done that renovation, taking that home and putting beautiful furniture and art pieces in there so it's easier to sell. And a pro forma is when you take all of those numbers and build a budget for every individual project you may have. So we'll go over some pro formas. Draws, when you're using hard money, you'll have a draw schedule that they are separated into typically 3 or 4 different draws where you're requesting money from the hard money lender after completing different portions of the project. And of course, cosmetic is for the smaller cosmetic flips where you're just making it look prettier, not getting into the nitty-gritty, so to speak. So nuggets of information and 1,000 or hundreds of pieces, it can be overwhelming, but today we're going to put these nuggets together and hopefully simplify those for you. Okay. So you've already introduced me. I don't think I have to go into this again. You did a great job of introducing. I think my bio was a little outdated, so now I've completed 38 flip properties and 17 years of experience. So the process is a long process when you look at it this way, but it moves very quickly when you're actually in the midst of everything. So the first step of the process is actually identifying the property, and how do you identify the property and pull the comparables? So it's just like looking for any property. Like if you were looking for a property to purchase and live in, it's going to be a little different of a structure to that, because you're not going to be as worried, so to speak, about what the numbers look like in terms of acquisition and renovation. But when you're identifying a property to flip, you are going to be looking at how much can I buy this property for? How much can I spend on renovation? And does it make sense in terms of resale? And that's where you pull the comparables. For my individual projects, I always pull two sets of comps. I look for properties, and when I've identified one property, I look for the initial comp to make sure I am paying the right price for that property upon initial acquisition. But then I also look for the after renovated value comps. So I can see, after I've put all this renovation money into it, what will this project actually sell for? So once I've done that and the comps look good to me, I'm going to determine if it meets the 70% ARV rule. And this is a typical hard money model. Every hard money banker is different. Some will use a 65% ARV rule. My particular lender that I've worked with for many years, he does a 70% ARV rule. And all that means is when you're taking the subject property, let's say the property is 100,000, just to use round numbers, 70% of that property should include the price of acquisition and the price of renovation. So let's say, for example, you're buying a property for $30,000, but the property also needs $40,000 worth of renovations. Well, with that 70% ARV rule, it generally means you would make a 15% profit off of that particular project. So if it's a $70,000 for acquisition and renovation, it's a go. If it's $80,000, it's not a go, because it doesn't meet that 70% ARV rule. And if it's a different hard money lender, if it's 65%, then all of that needs to be bundled into $65,000. So when you're looking at all of that, you want to determine if the deal works. If you're not using hard money, now you can use a different structure because you don't have all those fees and you don't have the high interest rates. If you're using traditional bank financing, which we'll get into later in the presentation, of course, that's cheaper money. So the ARV rule would be a little different. Now, determining the type of financing that you're going to use is very important to the project. Of course, you can always use cash. Cash is king. There's construction loans where you can go to a regular bank and use a construction loan. And then there's hard money, which people traditionally use for flips just because it's easier and it's faster. There's a line of credit, so you can use your home and get a line of credit on your home and use money that way, and typically interest rates are really low. And same thing, you can use a home equity loan as well. So there's different ways that you can finance flips, and everyone chooses to do them differently. Me personally, I like to use other people's money to make money, so I tend to use hard money. Previewing the property and determining the cost of renovation. So this is a really—
Real quick though, before we move on to that fourth point, just to back up a little bit to your second point about determine if it meets the 70% ARV rule. So, but what about this? And what about in terms of the as-is value though, right? So even if the project is projected to meet the 70% AR rule, what about, do you also look at the as-is value and do a test regarding the as-is value? Because what I'm thinking is that to protect your position in case you do buy the property and if you have to get rid of it before it's fully renovated.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's part of number one, where you're pulling two sets of comps, right? So the first set of comp is to cover the actual initial acquisition value. So if the property is listed at $30,000, you're going to pull comps and see if properties that are in the same exact condition with the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms and all that have also sold for 30. If they have sold for 30, then you make, give it an offer that's a little bit lower or perhaps the same if it's super competitive. It depends on your market. DC is a very competitive market and surrounding areas, the entire DMV. So the likelihood of lowballing in this market and winning is very low. So you do pull comps twice. You pull the first acquisition comps, to see what you should offer, and then you pull the after renovated comps to make sure you'll be able to get that higher ARV so you can make a profit.
I see. Okay.
So number 4 is previewing the property and determining the cost of renovations. And this is a really important step, like I said, because, if you're a new person flipping, you're not going to be able to really go into a property and say, okay, new electrical heavy up 6,500, new roof 8,000, now I can pretty much be like my own contractor in terms of putting estimates together because I've been around it so much. But when I first started, I wasn't able to do that. I was like, okay, I was getting so many different numbers from different contractors. Now I can kind of ballpark it, and over time, everyone will be able to do that. So the first few flips, I always suggest going in there with multiple contractors and having them give you quotes. That way you can compare it side by side. And over time, you'll say, okay, well, the average for new roofs on this size house, on a row house, is about $6,000 to $8,000. The average HVAC system is going to be about $10,000 to $12,000 on a 2,500 square foot house. So you really want to make sure, though, your numbers are tight, because if your numbers are off, that digs into your profit. So going in there with a contractor that you trust, somebody who has been referred to you, that's key, so you can put those right numbers into number 5, which is completing your pro forma.
Now, going back to the contractor thing, though, do you find that sometimes there's some contractors that are kind of hesitant to make the time to go out unless because I've heard of maybe some situations where investors have to actually maybe pay the contractor just to get them to come out and do an estimate. Have you run into that?
I've heard of some people dealing with that. I've never had to deal with that personally, because the idea is a good contractor knows that you're going to have to give several quotes before you get a job. I mean, It's like being a real estate agent, right? You show maybe 20 houses before the client writes an offer. You don't get paid along the way. So I think if you have hesitation from a contractor that it may not be the right contractor for you, then you need to keep on getting some better referrals, because most of the people that I use, are either referral based. I've worked with them over time, or, I'll go on good old Thumbtack or Home Advisor and interview people and give them a try, and then determine, I start them out with smaller projects and then decide, okay, well, they did a good job on this, I'll use them for a bigger project. So I truly believe that if you're establishing a long-term relationship with someone and you explain it to them like that up front, like, I'm going to start flipping properties, I'm looking for someone to have a long-term relationship with, they're going to think about that, because you could potentially be giving them 2-3 big projects a year. Why would anybody want to charge you for that if you're offering that to them, So maybe it's just a matter of positioning.
Good point.
So going on to number 5, completing the pro forma. The pro forma, as I mentioned earlier, is really the budget for the project. And I think this is the most important part of the entire flipping process. Pulling the comps and all of that is important because you need to plug those numbers into the pro forma. But building a complete pro forma can ensure that you have a successful project or a project that goes straight down the drain. So, when you're building your pro forma, there's lots of them online and everything. Not lots of good ones, lots of them online, but not lots of good ones. So you want to go in there and you want to make sure, because if you watch HGTV, the way they do their little pro formas, I'm always like, oh, that sounds magical, but that's not really how it is. They give you the acquisition price, they give you the renovation price, and then they give you the out sale and what the profit was from that. I wish it was that simple, but it's really not that simple. There's so many things that you have to think about. I mean, there's carrying costs, there's points, there's builder's risk, and we'll get into all of that when we review the pro forma together. But there's probably a good 30 line items on there of numbers that you got to get right in order to ensure that you have a profitable project. So building is key. I have a sample pro forma, and I'm happy to share that with you guys as well, so you can perfect it. And you're gonna change it, because a cash pro forma is going to be different than a hard money pro forma. It depends on your financing, and you'll have different versions of it depending on how what type of financing you use for each particular project. Number 6, requesting the proof of funds from the lender. So when you found a property and you've decided that you want to make an offer on the property, now it's time to call either on your hard money lender or call on yourself, depending on who you're going to use for the project. If you have the funds in the bank, then most of the time you'll just be able to print a financial statement showing that you have the funds readily available. If you're using hard money or a bank, you will request either a pre-approval letter or a proof of funds letter. And that's typically given after you've shared your comps and that the deal actually works. So, and I'll give you an example. Every time I find a deal, I call, my lender, and I'm like, I found this really great deal. I've written a summary up. I have the comps, both on acquiring the property and selling the property. And so he reviews my comps and he goes through everything, and he's like, this looks like a great deal, Cher. Now I'm going to send the inspector out so he can ensure that your comps are actually right on target. So as much as he loves and trusts me, he still has somebody go and double check that my comps were on target. So when you're looking at your proof of funds, it's really important, though, when you're making an offer in competitive markets, to have that readily available. Because you can imagine, if you make an offer and you're not showing that you can actually afford to buy the property, then they're not going to take you as seriously as someone who's showing a financial statement or showing a lender letter saying, okay, this person's ready to go. They're ready to pull the trigger. The key with proof of funds is that they can close quickly, because the name of the game is who can get to closing seamlessly and the quickest. So most hard money lenders can close anywhere between 7 to 10 days. As long as you can clear title on the property, most of the time, I would say 7 to 10 days is the average. Number 7, providing the
real quick though about closing. So I mean, I'm even thinking, like, why would it even take 7 to 10 days? I mean, really, if the hard money lender can just send the wire within a day, but is it the title search that holds up the process?
It's the title. So, there's a process that goes on in the background while you may have funds readily available. The title company is pulling title on the property. And in many cases, when they're distressed properties, there could be liens on the property. It could be an estate that hasn't been opened or is pending, closeout, something like that. So it's not really the funds, it's title that can hold you up. And that's actually, the deal that I'm working on right now is a perfect example of that. There are these outstanding liens on the property. We were ready to close on Monday, but we can't close on Monday because we can't close on a property that has outstanding liens, or they can't find the information from their mortgage company or what have you. So the title company has to ensure that all those liens are removed, or they're going to be paid off at closing. However, the seller is going to handle that before we can close.
I see. Now, going back to the inspector thing, when the hard money lender, is that a common practice for the hard money lender to send out an inspector?
Absolutely. It's part of the process. They need to validate the deal and make sure you're just not pulling numbers out of thin air. They want to make sure that the numbers make sense, because they want to get paid back. They want to get their monthly high interest that they're making, but they also want to get paid back, the lump sum that they've loaned you as well. Right. So it's in their best interest to actually do a broker price opinion on their side.
Gotcha. And then that cost for the inspection, would they maybe add that cost to some of the, I guess, like an application fee or something, or some type of upfront cost?
Yeah, so
Origination?
usually and we're going to get to
Oh,
this as
approved.
part of when we go through financing and everything. So I don't know if you want me to answer
Okay,
now
we'll wait.
or
We'll
we'll
wait.
wait. Okay. So number 7, providing your EMD, also known as your earnest money deposit funds, and closing costs to the agent or the title company. So part of the process when you make an offer is to include your earnest money deposit. And typically what the earnest money deposit is, you saying to the seller, look, I am really serious about your property. I'm so serious that I'm going to put $5,000 in escrow, and you're going to hold that money with the title company. And the title company is going to apply that money to my acquisition and closing costs. So, earnest money deposit, whether you're buying an investment property or personal property, is part of the game. The higher your earnest money deposit, the more invested you are in the deal. So when you're making an offer, a seller is going to look at whether, offer that has $5,000 in EMD versus $10,000 in EMD. They're going to take the offer with 10,000 EMD because they're like, they have more to lose here. There's more skin in the game. So you do want to think about that as you're making offers. It's not like you're going to lose that money. The only way that you could lose that money is if you violate the terms of the agreement. So you want to be very careful as you put together your offer with your realtor that you're covering the days that are in the contingency periods, and you're watching those, because if you miss them, then you could potentially lose that earnest money deposit. Number 8, identifying a type of investor. So, I do these projects many different types of ways. I can just use hard money. I can use a first lien hard money and a second lien hard money. I can also sometimes do it solo and just do all cash. I prefer not to do that. Or I can partner on these deals, and I can do the hard money, and then I can get an investment partner to cover the carrying costs and the points on the hard money loan. So there's tons of different ways to, package financing or package an investor. It's your comfort level. Some people decide they want to start out real small, and they may just loan $30,000 and have that $30,000 financed as hard money. So they may be in a second lien position. So, however you want to start out to get your feet wet, I encourage people to join at their comfort level, because you just don't want to dive in and then hold your
True. That's
breath.
true.
So when we have all that stuff into place, we're going to submit an offer. If you're using an agent, then, of course, your agent would submit the offer for you. Sometimes it may be a wholesale deal, so it may be a direct offer to the seller. Now, I will say quickly that if you're not going to use a licensed agent, at least snatch some GCAR or whatever your local real estate board is, contracts, because those contracts protect you the most. If a wholesaler provides you a contract, then have an attorney review it. And if you can't afford to do that, then use a local realtor contract, because most of those wholesale contracts, they don't protect you as a buyer. They only protect the seller. So much of the language in there is all in their favor. So don't learn that the hard way.
Wow. So Cher, can you give us an example of how it doesn't protect the buyer in those cases?
Sure. So I have a friend right now that, just purchased, well, he owned a bunch of properties in Baltimore. He wanted to get rid of these properties. They're all side by side units. Wholesaler reached out to him, and he said, okay, yes, I want to sell the properties. They sent over a 3-page contract, which, mind you, a contract in DC is typically about 48 pages of legal jargon. So
Wow.
3 pages to, and Maryland is longer. Maryland may be 55 pages. So 55 pages compared to 3, I was like, that sounds like a disaster. I looked at the contract. The contract has no contingency periods. So no closing date, no nothing. So I'm like, so basically this guy can just wake up in 2 years and decide he wants to buy this property from you, because the way the contract was written, it has absolutely no timelines or contingencies that protect, my friend. So he's like, I'll never do that again. I'm like, yes, please. No, at least you have a friend that's a broker, first of all, so you should have called me. But if you didn't want to do that, then you should at least use, the very mainstream contracts that are readily available online.
Mhm. Okay.
But, it's always best, if you're not going to use an agent, use an attorney, because if you're not familiar with the language, you may be filling in things that, you might be filling in wrong, and they may not protect you. And you want to be able to get out of the contract if you need to and know how to get out of it. And if you're just using their contracts, it's just not going to work.
Makes sense.
So when it's time to submit your offer, like I said, you're going to use an agent, or you're going to do it directly to the seller. And the next step after that is, once you have an accepted offer, also in our area known as a ratified contract, then you're going to now send the ratified contract or the executed contract over to the hard money lender and the title company. If you have an agent, they'll do that for you. But if you're doing it yourself, you'll have to send that over so they can start processing that entire deal. So, of course, the title company is going to start pulling title, and they're going to make sure the title is clear. And once the title is clear, then the lender can close very quickly. So even though you may have a 10-day close, if title clears in 3 days and your lender is ready to go, then you can potentially close sooner. I mean, most sellers aren't going to be mad about that unless they're living in the property. They may want more time. But many of these properties that we flip, for the most part, no one's living in them. So if you can do a quicker close, why not? In terms of sending applicable fees to your hard money lender, so those fees can vary. It can be, some hard money lenders may charge 2 points, some hard money lenders may charge 1 point. It all depends on the deal you have worked out. So when I say points are equal to percentage points. So if you're paying 3 points, you're paying 3%. If you're paying 2 points, you're paying 2%. And that's of the overall loan value. So if it's $100,000 loan and it's 3 points, you're going to be paying $3,000.
Mhm.
And every hard money lender may require that money be due at different points. For example, my hard money lender requires 3 points. 1 point is due immediately as soon as they have agreed. So we have a loan commitment in place. I am required to send them 1%. So if it's $100,000, $1,000, then there's another $150 title search that they conduct themselves, because they're like, wait, we don't only trust your title company. I want our title company to check title too. So there's $150 for that. And then there's like a $250 inspection fee, where the inspector goes over the comps and also goes out to the property and says, okay, this scope of work and draw schedule actually makes sense. And I'll explain more about the draw schedule and scope of work shortly. But that's pretty much so on the initial fees. And the back end fees, like my hard money lender, out of those 3 points, they charge 1 point up front, but then 2 points at closing. So that money, that 2%, is due once we're signing away and actually on the day of settlement, retaining the keys for the property and everything. That's when the additional fees are due, once the lender funds, the total loan on that day. That all makes sense?
Question for you, Cher, is that so? But is there usually like a time frame where it's like maybe they're loaning, the hard money lender is loaning it for like 6 months, and then if you need to extend, and they charge you extra points?
Absolutely. So in this case, and like I said, every deal is different, but like with my particular hard money lender, I have 6 months at a 10.25% interest rate, I believe. After 6 months, there are additional fees that are due. So, and I can't remember that it's called is it like a funding fee, or they call it something. And basically with every extension fee, that's what it's called. Every 2 months thereafter the 6 months, an extension fee is due. An extension fee is an additional point. So it really motivates you to get your project finished because it's eating into your profit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that would be, part of the additional fees.
Got you. Now, Cher, with the what happens if they send the inspector to inspect it and the deal doesn't go through, right?
Mhm.
Are you still on the hook to pay that inspection fee?
Yes. You're always on the hook to pay everything with hard money.
Ah, okay.
And many times that 1% that you've paid, it depends on the hard money lenders. Some will return it, some will keep it. So it's all about the relationship you have too with the hard money lender, because that's part of the game. So they're like, well, you assessed this deal. You said this was a good deal. Now we sent the inspector out there, and our inspector says, your comps are all wrong. Your assessment is all wrong. So you know what? We're keeping this 1%. So you should know what you're doing before you jump in.
True. True.
Yeah. So after you've sent all the applicable fees to the hard money lender, they will start processing and working with the title company to get to closing. So they'll be working in the background, getting the lender docs in order, working with their attorney to ensure they have the right documents to send to the title company for the day of closing. Part of the process too, so number 12, create and send the draw schedule to the hard money lender. So all of this stuff happens very quickly. I know this sounds like we've been working for like a few weeks, but actually this probably happens all within 3 days. So when you do identify a deal, it all happens so quickly that you want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, because once the lender gives you the loan commitment and they are expecting their fees and that 1% and the inspection fee and all that, they're also going to request the draw schedule from you. Now, the draw schedule is something that you should really come up with your general contractor, because it's going to be really important that the numbers that you put into this make sense. And what I mean by that is, let's say draw one may be demolition of the property, and not only demolition, but also, getting the garbage company to come, the bulk company to come and remove all those items. If you're saying that's going to cost, let's say it's $10,000, well, that $10,000, you have to make sure that everything was done as exactly how it was stated in the draw schedule. Because if it wasn't, when the lender sends their inspector over, they're not going to give you the full draw, or they may not give you the draw at all. So you want to make sure that your contractor and you are on the same page, because if you're not on the same page and you put together the draw schedule and it's in, a weird order, and the contractor's like, wait a second, we got to do the demo before we put in a new kitchen, so timelines and order are really important. And that's why getting the contractor to assist you with that is key. So along the way, you want to request a quote for builder's risk insurance, and most of them will require that you pay a 6-month premium. So what builder's risk insurance does is it protects you for the duration of the project. Most lenders are going to require you to have that. I haven't seen one that doesn't require you. it's usually a bit pricey, more pricey than, regular homeowners insurance, because it covers you in case anything happens, right? Someone gets hurt at the property, whether it's one of the contractors, if a tree falls on the house, if there's a flood, if your HVAC gets stolen, all of those things are covered with builder's risk. And all of those things have happened to me. A tree has fallen on the house unexpectedly. Somebody has stolen my outside condenser from a project. Somebody has stolen the tools from the contractor inside. So it does help. And, insurance covers all of it. So you definitely want to get a good insurance company. Number 14, coordinating closing with the investor, the share investor, and then sharing an investor info with the title company. All of that is super important. And what I mean by that is when you have an investor, you may have a separate agreement outside of the hard money agreement you have with the lender. So you want to make sure all those ducks are in a row. So when you get to closing, there aren't any surprises, because if your second investor is in a second lien position, they're going to have different documents that you will need to sign and that the title company will need to review. So when you do get to closing, you can sign off on all of that, and it's not the first time you're seeing it. You want to review all those things in advance.
Now, Cher, why I heard that some hard money lenders don't allow the investor to have a second lien, and why is that?
Well, I can't really answer on why, because I'm not a hard money lender, but if I had to guess, I would just guess that, it may be a deal where there's just not enough meat in the deal. So, let's use just, roundabout numbers. If it's $100,000 property, it's 50,000 in renovation, and you're selling it for 250, the profit is 30,000, but then you have a second lien position for 40,000. They may say, okay, well, there's no way that the second lien position is going to get paid because there's just not enough money there. My particular hard money lender does it on a case-by-case basis. So, if there's enough meat in the deal and it makes sense, he'll approve it. If it's tight, he won't allow it. So I'm guessing he does that just because he feels like, he doesn't want to deal with the second lien position not getting paid.
I see, right.
Mm-hmm. So the next one is confirming your funds for closing and, requesting a cashier's check. Although we're not really using that many cashier's checks anymore. It's mostly wires that we're using now. But I've seen this happen a ton of times. When I say confirm funds for closing, a lot of times people are using funds from their IRAs or different investment accounts. And like I said, closing can happen as quick to 7 to 10 days. Sometimes it takes 14 to 21 days to get money out of your different investment accounts. So if you know that you're going to start flipping, you will have to take that money out ahead of time because you're going to need to access that money for closing. And sometimes pushing back closing is not an option because then you're out of contract. Then the seller can go after your earnest money deposit. So you want to make sure you stay within those timelines and have your money readily available. And if you have an investment partner, make sure they have their money readily available because you're counting on that money to get to closing. Number 16, determining what permits are needed for, if needed. So, a lot of times when you're doing a cosmetic flip, you don't need to pull permits. You may just be painting and sanding the floors and you're not moving any walls or doing any major plumbing or anything. So you may not need a permit at all. In most cases where you're, doing a bathroom renovation, you're going to need a plumbing permit. If you're doing a kitchen renovation, you're going to need probably building and plumbing. And if you're doing like a full gut renovation and you're doing an electrical heavy up, you're going to need a permit for electrical. So your contractor should be able to advise you on what permits you need. Sometimes they can pull permits for you. It's part of the quote they've given you. As the owner, you can pull permits yourself if you want to do that. I personally don't like pulling permits myself. I'd rather them take care of that for me. So I have pulled them in the past. It's just, I don't love dealing with the DC government or Maryland, PG County government, whatever. So I let them handle it. And, it's typically an additional fee, but it makes, if you don't have that type luxury of standing in line and dealing with all that, I certainly think it makes sense to have a contractor handle it for you.
So Cher, just as a general overview, what's the general process of pulling a permit?
So you have to apply for it, and it depends on the type of permit. I mean, if you're pulling an electrical permit, you're going to need an electrician who has, a master electrician license, so you can put his license number as part of the permit, because they're not going to let you pull a permit without an electrical permit without being a master electrician. Same thing, if you're pulling a plumbing permit, you're going to need a master plumber and his license number, so you can attach that to the permit as well. So it's an application process like anything. You apply for it, you pay a fee for it, and most of the time it doesn't take an insane amount of time to get a permit. It could be a week, 2 weeks. It really depends what you're doing. When you get into, larger projects, like you're blowing off the back and doing a massive extension and stuff, and you need an architect, and all that good stuff, then projects like that they'll take a longer time to get certain types of permits, especially additions. So next thing is determining your start date. So demo day, your formal walkthrough with a contractor, and creating a detailed checklist. I don't know how familiar you guys yet are with the flipping process, but one thing you will learn is that contractors are not very organized individuals. They're generally good at what they do, and most of them don't have a administrative assistant or any of that good stuff. So if you like organization and order, which even if you don't like it, you should have it for a flip project, you need to create a checklist and have that on site. Whether that's your draw schedule and a checklist or just your draw schedule, I like to print mine and have them all over the project so the contractors cannot say anything to me that they missed anything, that they didn't know draw one inspection was coming up. Nope, you have it on site. It's there. Check the boxes off before we pay this $250 inspection fee. That stuff is very important. I mean, because that in itself can slow down your project tremendously if you have to do multiple inspections for one draw. And if you're organized with it, then, and you're really leading your project as a project manager, unless you decide to hire a project manager, then it makes the most sense, to keep a checklist or keep the draw schedule on site and do regular walkthroughs with the general contractors, because the last thing you want to do is not be on site at least 2 to 3 times a week. If you can be there more, even better. But, you don't want to go to a project and look up and say, oh, where did that wall come from? That wasn't in, the architectural drawings. Now we have to tear down the whole wall. You don't want to go through those things. So in order to avoid that, I would say having a draw schedule as many places as you can within the property is the smartest thing to do, and doing regular routine walkthroughs. And you can set a date for that, right? Like you can say Fridays at noon for 15 minutes or 30 minutes, we're going to do our weekly walkthrough with the general contractor. It makes a lot of sense. It makes your projects far more seamless too.
And Cher, how do you structure your payment schedule to your contractors with the draw schedule?
So every contractor has different requirements, so some contractors may want everything done in a lump sum. Some may want to be paid on a weekly basis. I prefer contractors that want to be paid in a lump sum because it just makes it easier for me. The only thing that's tricky about a lump sum is, okay, now I'm giving you $20,000. I got to hope that you don't run away, right? Because that's happened to me too. Where you're giving, a lump sum of money and you're hoping that this person is going to carry out, the duties that they're supposed to do and complete the project up to a certain point, and then all of a sudden they're missing and you're out of $20,000. So, if you don't know the contractor or they haven't come highly recommended and you're just kind of starting out, I think if you can set up a weekly payment plan, then it makes the most sense. A lot of investors like to pay for materials themselves. It really depends on the relationship you have with the contractor. Like the ones that I use now, I do trust. So, I'll give them my Amex card and, just kind of routinely check to see what's been charged on there. Now, it didn't start out that way. It took us a while to build up that type of rapport. But I've never done the weekly payments. I have some colleagues that flipped as well, and they prefer doing weekly payments. It's just, it ends up being a lot of work on your side, to commit to. So I guess it's all dependent on your comfort level. Biweekly visits to each project, that's at minimum. Like 2 to 3 times a week should really be the minimum amount of time you go to a project. Honestly, if you can go every day, it's not a bad idea. It can't hurt. It can only help. If you're visiting a project once a week, that's not enough. Like there's too much going on at a project to only go once a week, especially in those beginning stages. Demo, you don't necessarily have to be there every day, but you want to make sure that, when they're demoing, they're not leaving debris outside and, having that particular town come and give you a citation for doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. Because like I said, contractors aren't necessarily thinking like that. They're just thinking about getting the project done and doing a good job. They're not thinking about these violations and stuff. And they don't have to pay these violations. You do. But, title is in your name or the mortgage is in your name. You own the property. So you need to be responsible for making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if you can't do that way, then finding a project manager to do that for you. Scheduling your draw walkthroughs, I'd say 3 to 4 draws is more than enough because you don't want to pay for a draw inspection more than 3 or 4 times because it adds up. Could be anywhere from $250 to $350. And then in some cases, excuse me, sorry, I need a sip of water.
Yeah.
In some cases, you may, if your draw 1 ends up missing something, then you may have to go back and do another inspection. So you're paying for 2 draws for draw 1. So you want to make sure that, like I said, the checklist will help with stuff like that. But in addition, you just want to keep your draws to a minimum. You don't want to spread them out. If you have larger projects going on, like when you have, like I had a luxury condo conversion, that has a lot more draws to it. But like a 6-month flip, you shouldn't have more than 3 to 4. Determining whether or not to self-stage or hire a stager. I'm a definite fan of staging. Staging sells houses quicker. I have personally done some flips and not staged it and regretted it every time. I had one property that was on the market. It was a beautiful property. Its pictures came out beautiful, everything. It was on the market for 30 days. It was priced right. I was like, oh gosh, I should have staged it. I literally staged it on day 31, and on day 32 it was under contract.
Wow.
And it's happened to me multiple times where I'm just like, stop being cheap, Cher. And because I mean, it's a $2,500 to $5,000 investment, but if you build it in your pro forma and you know that up front, then it makes all the sense in the world, because the way you have to think about it is it's $2,500 to $5,000, but if your house sits on the market for months, you're paying more than that. So you might as well go ahead and make that investment and know that it's going to move quicker when it's staged.
And Cher, with the staging, so what exactly is that? You're basically like renting furniture, I guess, right?
Well, you're not only renting furniture, you're hiring a design professional to go in there and pick out particular pieces, and not like furniture, artwork, whatever, lighting, for them to make that space look as appealing as possible. Because we can go out and pick pretty furniture ourselves, but it doesn't mean that it will look great in that space, or it may not. It may be a more traditional home, and you may pick modern furniture, and it doesn't really go together. So a stager has a more artistic eye that's going to go in there and think about spacing, think about the type of, design that should go in that space and all of that. And they take care of that for you. Staging contracts are typically 45 to 60 days in our market. Most of the time, though, I wouldn't even say staging furniture stays in that long. My most recent flip, we were under contract in 13 days. So, I mean, she was able to get her furniture out a couple of days after we went under contract.
And I can imagine that a lot of psychology is involved in staging, right? Because I guess you have to kind of stage it to tailor, the type of buyer that you expect to be drawn to that neighborhood, I guess, right?
Absolutely. And, and spacing too is really key, because if you have like an awkward room, the shape of the room is awkward, and you can't put a regular queen size bed set in there, a stager will know, what to do with that space. Maybe they make it into an office, or they put a day bed in there with a desk or something like that to maximize, the space and make it look bigger than it actually is. And another thing about staging is 70% of homes sell by professional picks online. So if you can imagine, if you have a home that's not staged, the pics aren't going to look as nice as as a home that's been staged, and how professional those pictures look. So just from that aspect in itself, whether you're using an agent or you're taking the professional pictures yourself and, posting online, you do want to consider that, because that will help sell your house faster. Final inspection with the contractor. So the final inspection is always the most grueling inspection, because it's always the little things, that you don't really think about. It may be, some missing electrical outlet covers. It may be some touch-up painting. It's all the tiny things that no one wants to really take the time to do. And at this time, the contractor's like ready to get out of the project. So he's like, or she is, I don't want to go through all these 10,000 little items, but those 10,000 little items is what helps you sell the house. So the final inspection should always be, like, you should go through that together. And a final inspection may take 3 final inspections to get to the real final inspection, because you don't want to make that final payment until everything's done. And what I've seen, some of my friends, colleagues do is they give that final inspection before those tiny little items have been completed and the contractor's MIA. And then you have to hire someone else to come in here and do all these little things and come out of the pocket further. So no payments before the true final inspection, no matter how grueling their story is, because they all have stories.
Now, Cher, what about this though? I can imagine one of the major risks is that even after you have the initial home inspection and you estimate out the renovation costs, I guess there's a huge risk that when the contractors start working, that some major stuff gets pops up in terms of like additional costs, so how do you mitigate that type of risk of them finding more stuff to fix?
Well, there's no perfect answer for that because when you start opening up walls, you really don't know what you're going to find. So when you're building your pro forma, though, you should always build in a 15% construction contingency that should at least help you with some of those costs. And that happens on almost every project. You know, it's like on my last project, it was electrical. There was all these weird hidden electrical disasters behind the wall. And when you started opening up more walls, you started seeing more things that probably should have never been done. So in that case, you know, we didn't budget changing out and having to do an entire heavy up. You know, electrical was supposed to run us 2,000. It ended up running us 6,000. In that case, it worked out because we had our 15% contingency built in. Sometimes 15% doesn't cover it though. You know, I've had other projects, like I said, you know, a tree fell on it, and yes, the insurance ended up covering that, which was great, but insurance takes a while to fund, so we had to come out of pocket to remove the tree, fix the roof, do all of those things. And then some things insurance doesn't cover. You know, I had another project and we did a full gut on the kitchen. And when we lifted up the floors, I mean, there was some like extensive plumbing damage, which plumbing should have probably been all in about 7,000 on this project. It ended up being like 15,000. So we did eat into the profit a little to deal with that, but we made it up on the back end because we sold it for higher than we thought we were going to sell it for. So it doesn't always turn out to be a disaster. I mean, but you know, if you have to grow some thick skin in terms of what's behind the walls, because there's always something behind the walls or under the floors.
True.
Yeah. So now after you've gone through your final inspection, now you are going to either find a realtor to list your property with, or you're going to list it yourself. However you decide to do it, you know, you want to make sure that you are marketing the property the right way, because the more you market, the more views you'll have, the more, you know, the easier it will be for you to sell. When your property goes under contract and you have a ratified contract, now you have to alert the hard money lender, and if you have an investor, because now you have to, you know, do the final numbers for your investor to see how much they get paid and make profit wise, as well as yourself. And then of course the hard money lender already knows how much they have to get paid back, and the title company will be working with them to ensure, you know, they get the proceeds wired to them at closing. If there's a secondary investor, like I said, you want their wire information as well. I typically don't pay my investors out at the settlement table. It takes me about 48 hours to go through everything because I may have receipts and stuff that I want to put together. So I want to make sure I give them true final numbers as well. So it takes about 48 hours for me to turn that around. Once your property goes under contract, of course, in many cases, your new buyer will have a home inspection repair list. It's important to have a general contractor that has done the project that will be willing to go back out and make these fixes, because essentially they're guaranteeing their work at this point. They may charge you additional funds if it's, you know, something bigger. If it's smaller things like dings on the wall or missing electrical cover and stuff like that, they probably wouldn't charge you for that. And in some cases, it may be something you might have decided that you weren't going to put a new roof on, but in the negotiation with the home inspection, with the new buyer, they're requiring you to get a new roof. So you'll have to get a roofer or a contractor who has a roofer to, you know, do that work. So that would be out of pocket costs for you. And of course, removing the staging furniture, you'll want to coordinate that with the stager at that point. I generally don't like to remove my staging furniture until the home inspection contingency has been lifted, because if we can't get through that negotiation, then we may have to go back on the market And I like to utilize the entire duration of the staging contract if I need to. Now on 27, you want to schedule all utilities to get turned off. Don't make that mistake that I did. I think on my first flip, I didn't remember to do that. And I was paying somebody else's Pepco bill for like 3 months. So definitely turn off all the utilities. 28, go to closing. So this is a fun day. You know, everything's been negotiated. You're just coming to pick up your funds at this point and get paid out. This is the exciting part. And you'll receive a copy of the settlement statement for your records. You'll want to hold on to that so you can go through that with your accountant. And of course, they're going to tax you for your profit. So you just want to make sure it's the right number. And then 29, let's say your builder's risk check, you prepay generally 6 months. So if you have disposed of the flip prior to then they'll be giving you an overage check in most cases. And same thing with your water escrow. At settlement, the title company always charges $500 in water escrow, but you may only have a $50 bill. So you may get an overage check for that as well. So this completes the entire flip process. Any questions on that?
That was a lot of good information, man.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm glad we're recording this. It's a lot. There's a lot to it. And like you said in the beginning, a lot of moving pieces and everything, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Come together when you finish everything. It come together great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So questions I had is actually for number 1 even. So I imagine that, you know, one of the biggest challenges is actually identifying a property, or like getting a property, getting a good deal on a property.
Sure.
So, and you said that when you kind of look at deals, you're doing the, you're pulling the 2 comps and you're looking at like the 70% ARV rule, right? And everything. So tell me this, is that when you are doing these flips, right? When the house is ready to be put on the market, have you experienced a situation where you got the house ready to be put on the market, but it's like the real estate is going through a downturn? And so do you like maybe consider renting it rather than selling it at that point?
Well, knock on wood, I've never been in that situation before.
Good.
And I think it's because it's the market that we're in. But you know, I do know people that have been in that situation and they've had to get out of the hard money loan and into a different loan type and hold on to the property. Definitely, I've seen that happen. Me personally, I've never had to do that before, but if I did have to, it's something that I assess in the beginning, because I do look at rental comps just to ensure that it would, like, the rental income would be able to cover most of the mortgage, if not all.
Wow. Okay. And so, okay. So then therefore, I guess, you know, in some situations, have you decided then to keep the property as a rental rather than flipping it? Like you go in?
I haven't personally, no, but I did have one property that stayed on the market for quite some time, and I started exploring that as an option. The monthly rental income would have covered the monthly mortgage. I wouldn't have been making a tremendous profit on it. And as soon as I was about to pull the trigger, we got an offer on the property. So I didn't get to go down that road. But if I had to, I definitely would consider it, because I've had colleagues do the same and then wait a year or 2 and then made a profit off of it. After renting for a little while, did a little touch-up painting when the renters moved out, and then put it back on the market for sale.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I was just thinking about just the mindset of like that passive income, you know?
Yeah.
But I guess, I mean, obviously, you know, you're making a lot with the flipping, but I guess like long-term speaking, like I mean, I was just thinking like long-term of like having a portfolio of rental properties that I could like retire on, you know, because if I get property managers in place to manage them for me, and then it's just, you know, that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great idea. I mean, I have some rental properties, but my rental properties are mostly properties that I specifically bought to as rental properties, or I lived in them first and then they turned into rental properties. I just
Okay.
haven't had a flip that turned into a rental property.
Okay.
But I do think diversifying your portfolio is key, because while I love getting the lump sum of money from flipping, I also like getting that monthly money from my rental income.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So with rental, so when considering a rental deal, what type of criteria do you look at in terms of cash flow?
Well, I think everyone's different. I think everyone's looking for at least a 5% cap rate. It depends on the deal though. Like I just saw a property today in Baltimore. It's a wholesale deal. It's a $17,000 property. It probably needs about $20,000 worth of work. So you could technically do that all cash.
Wow.
And the house would rent for $900 a month. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm fine with that.
That's not bad at all. To be honest, I agree. I agree with that. I agree with that.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
I agree with that.
And when you said sometimes the idea of living in the property, I guess there's certain tax advantages, right? Or whatever, or just advantages if you live in the property, or I guess with the loan, with the lending, right? Because if you live in the property, I guess for a while, then you can get a better loan.
Yeah, absolutely. So if it's your principal residence, you always get a better loan. You always get a better interest rate and a lower down payment. If it's a second home or a investment property, they generally want you to come up with anywhere between 10 and 20% down. And in many cases, your interest rate is a little bit higher than it would normally be with your principal residence.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So with identifying properties, what do you do in terms of like trying to find property? Like, have you ever worked? I've heard of this term, the bird dog, and I'm actually like
Mhm.
digging into like maybe getting into bird dogging, because I hear that's a great way to kind of get into real estate,
Sure.
gain
Mhm.
experience. So
Yeah,
have
and we're
you?
going to actually talk about that in a little bit
We
further
do.
along in the presentation.
Oh, perfect.
Um, quickly, typically I do this presentation with Evelyn, but she's not here, so I'll just quickly go through her slide because I'm not the expert in title.
Cool.
But part of the process is definitely the settlement process is clearing title to ensure that you're getting a property that doesn't have any liens on it, like we discussed earlier. So, that's what her company does. And they look at the title. And if there is a lien on property, they figure out how to resolve it, or if they can pay off that lien at closing, or if there's a cloud on title, somebody is disputing that they own the property as well. You have to clear all of that up before you can get to settlement. And that's exactly what the title company does. And that's what title insurance protects you from as well. With a second lien position, as we discussed, they would be the ones creating the loan documents for the second lien position. So they create all that and give it to the investor to ensure, everyone's on the same page. And they can actually help if we are creating an LLC for this particular property. The title company can assist you with creating the LLC and expediting that process as well. So financing options, I know we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but of course, we can get into it a little further and look at some numbers. Cash, of course, you'd be taking money straight from your checking or savings or your IRA or 401ks. Some people use their life insurance. And probably the cheapest way besides your checking and savings is going to be a home equity line of credit, or a home equity loan, or a line of credit, because they tend to give you the cheapest interest rate. So you just would essentially be paying yourself back once you finished a flip. Home equity is when you actually use the equity of the loan, and so let's say, your house is worth $500,000, you have a $200,000 mortgage on it. They'll typically let you borrow 90% of the difference between the two, and they'll charge you interest on it over a certain period of time. Now, the line of credit is a little different. You're also using the equity on your home, but you don't have to utilize the whole amount at one time. So you may have an amount of 200,000, but maybe on one flip, you may only use 30,000 and then you pay yourself back. So it keeps an open line for you to utilize and you can use it on multiple projects, but it's not a set amount of money like the home equity loan would be. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's good.
With bank money, of course, bank money is going to be cheaper money than hard money. So generally what happens if you're using a construction loan and a commercial lender, you're going to need 10 to 20% of acquisition and many times of renovation as well. So, and I want to help you understand why people use hard money versus bank money, and that's a better way to explain it. So with bank money, for example, let's say you had a project and the ARV on that project was $1 million. Well, coming up with 20% of $1 million is a lot harder than finding a project that meets the 70% ARV rule where you don't have to come up with that amount of money. So on long-term projects, like when I did the cruise condominiums and I did the luxury condos, bank money was the way because they're giving me a 6% interest rate over 18 to 24 month period. That makes the most sense. But if I'm using hard money on that deal, I would make no money because I'd be paying 10.25% and it would just, and all these extension fees because they only typically loan up to 6 months. So it just doesn't make sense in terms of profitability for short-term projects versus long-term projects. And with a hard money loan, with a bank loan, you have to think of reserves as well, because many commercial lenders will require you to take, 6 to 9 months of interest. So whatever your mortgage payments are going to be times, let's say 9 months, and hold that in an account. So they're ensuring that you're paying your monthly note and not, defaulting on that. So in addition to that 20% of the ARV, you have that 6 to 9 months of reserves. They do have extension fees on commercial lending, but they're not as short term as 6 months. They may be anywhere from 12 to 36 months. How do you qualify for different loan programs? Now, every lender is going to be different. Bank money, traditional bank money is going to be stricter than hard money. Generally, you have to have good credit and you have to be able to show that you can pay the loan back. With hard money, you don't have to do that most of the time. Some hard money lenders don't care about your credit score at all. They don't care how much income you make. They don't care about any of that. All they care about is the deal and your experience, and can you get the appropriate amount of fees to closing. And I completely agree with that methodology because it just makes the most sense. If you're looking at a deal, it really shouldn't matter what your credit score is. It should matter that the pro forma is tight. It should matter that, the numbers in the pro forma make sense. Like they're more that the comps are, truly what they are, that you can get that after renovated value that you're predicting in the pro forma. Like in a good deal, if you have all of those things, then somebody's credit score has nothing to do with that. And their experience, of course, is going to be important, because if they have no idea what they're doing and they've never flipped a property before, it could be a disaster. So if you want to ensure, a good hard money deal, if I was a hard money lender, I would be less concerned with credit scores and assets. I would be more concerned with the deal and if it's a good deal and if you have the right experience. Carlos usually does this presentation with me. He's a hard money lender, so I'll go through this quickly because I am not a hard money lender expert, even though I've used them a bunch of times. So with private lenders, it's, like I said, easier to get a loan, but it's very expensive. So what would traditionally be maybe 5 or 6%, hard money is usually anywhere between 9 and 15%. You have seen rates drop as low as 7% like recently, but with those lower rates, you're also required to put more money down. So, and then the 6-month period for some hard money lenders, if it's a larger project, sometimes they'll loan up to a year without extension fees. But hard money lenders, it's all about the relationship you build with them over time. So on your first project, you may have a higher interest rate. By the time you get to project 3, they're like, okay, well, you know, Lance has been doing his thing. We're going to go ahead and drop this interest rate a little bit, you know, and we're not going to charge him extension fees on every delay. So, you know, it's all about the relationship with the hard money lender that you create. Flipping styles. So what kind of flipper are you going to be? And there's definitely, you know, everyone decides to play a different role when they start flipping. I mean, I kind of started backwards actually. Like I started with full gut flips versus cosmetic flips. I think it's probably better to do it the other way. Because then you kind of get your feet wet, right? You can go in and just make it look pretty and not worry about permits and architects and, you know, structural engineers and that kind of thing. So the basic is just like, you know, doing the bare minimum cleanup with, you know, builder grade finishes. And you still want to be thoughtful because you have to sell the property. So you want to do things that you know would sell in that particular market in terms of design and layout. And, you know, with like Amazon and all these different online shopping options, you can get materials for so much cheaper now that are just as nice as if you would buy them in Home Depot or Lowe's or any of those larger stores. What's the difference between a cosmetic versus a full gut? I went over this a little bit, but cosmetic is really nothing structural. Like it's all about making it look pretty, like taking the old out and, you know, modernizing it to a certain degree. Whereas a full gut is like you could be making structural improvements, you could be tearing down, most of the time you're tearing down the majority of walls, you know, doing the electrical, maybe perhaps adding an addition. So for full guts, most of the time you will need permitting and it's going to take a longer period of time. You could potentially do a cosmetic flip in a couple of weeks, whereas a full gut is definitely going to take you more for like 3 to 6 months, somewhere along that line. So a sample deal. So I'm going to have you guys do some live work. So get your calculators out. So we talked about after renovated value, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it's what the property is going to be worth after you've put the renovations into it. The renovation is what you're going to spend to make all those repairs. That's going to include materials and, you know, payments to the different contractors and subcontractors and all that good stuff. So if I said to you, Lance, I found this property, it's $200,000. It needs $100,000 worth of renovation, and I can sell this property for $650,000. What's the first thing you're going to do?
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to take 70% of the after repair value.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you said 650,000?
Yeah.
So that's 455,000 is the maximum that I would consider, right?
Right.
So then what's the next step you're going to do?
All right, and then I'm going to compare it. Then I'm going to calculate, okay, what's the, I guess, the all in, right? Like the purchase price plus the reno, right? And so what, purchase price 100,000?
200,000 for the purchase price.
Mm-hmm.
And 100,000 for the reno.
100,000 for the reno?
Yeah.
300,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so that's under my 455,000, you know, maximum. So then, yeah, it's a good deal.
It's a good deal.
Okay.
Exactly. So you got it. So the rule of thumb is pretty simple. I know sometimes people get caught up on the after renovated value because they're like, wait, what do I do next? I think a good way to look at it too is when you take that 450,000 in the sample and you deduct the acquisition cost and then you deduct the renovation cost, if you still have a surplus, then it's a good deal. If you have a deficit, then it's a no-go.
Absolutely not.
Now, also though, I would need to compare that 300,000 with the comps to make sure that the as-is value makes sense, right?
Absolutely. So you want to, because you don't want to pay too much for the acquisition costs if you don't have to. Now, some investors though really don't care about that initial comp. You know, they're like, look, if the numbers work, the numbers work. I don't care what I'm paying for it. As long as I'm profiting and I'm making a good profit, the first set of comparables don't matter to me. I think, you know, for me, it's hard because I'm a real estate broker. So I'm looking at comps all the time. I'm like, I want to know what the comps are on the front end and on the back end. So we can do a sample deal. Kyrie, this one's for you. The after renovated value of the property is $250,000.
Okay, cool. 250,000, right?
The acquisition of the property is $150,000.
Uh-huh.
And the renovation cost is $50,000.
So that'd be 250,000 plus 100,000, right? Which is 350,000, correct?
150,000 plus 50,000, so
Okay.
200,000.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. 200,000. Cool.
And the
All right.
actual
Boom.
renovated value is 250. So is this a good deal?
Now it's a bad deal because you only 200,000. You said the after price is 250,000, correct?
Right.
So it'd be an opposite.
Now, Kyrie, but you got to apply that 70%.
You got to apply the
70%.
70% rule to it.
Yeah.
So if you broke down the numbers for it, what would they look like? Like, what would those final numbers look like?
Right. Hold on.
All right.
So 200,000. Cool.
So, all right. So just to recap. So the 150 is the purchase price, and the 50,000 is the estimated renovation cost, right?
Yeah.
200,000 total like investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Cher saying that the ARV is 250,000, right?
Uh-huh.
So now you got to take the 70% of the 250,000.
All right, cool. Let me, because I ain't got my apologize.
Okay. Oh, I think you're on your phone, so you can't use the calculator.
Yeah.
I'll do it for you.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Put that number because I was looking for it.
I'll do it. Okay. All right. So, Kyrie, I took 70%. So I said 0.7 times.
125,000, correct?
No. 250 is the ARV.
All right.
So I took 0.7 times 250, right? And I get 175,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I said, okay,
yeah,
cool.
So that 175,000, what that number was. So what's that number? That number is the maximum that we will, it's the maximum that we want to spend, right?
Okay, yeah.
Because we don't want to spend more than 70% of the ARV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, but Cher is saying that when we calculate the 150 purchase price plus the 50,000 renovation cost, that's 200,000. So that's 25,000 more. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's a deficit. It was a deficit. Yeah.
Yeah. So absolutely. So that's a no-go deal.
Uh-huh.
So now let's look at the sample pro forma. I know this might be a little small on your screens. Yeah, so I'll kind of read through it live, but I just want you to get an idea. This was a particular flip that I did out in Waldorf. The acquisition and the sales price was $285. And then the construction cost, it was just a cosmetic flip. So we only had to put about $40,000 into it. It was a large house, though. It was about 4,500 square feet. So, you know, we had to paint the whole thing, do new carpeting and then paint the cabinets, new hardware on all the
Mhm.
cabinets, new lighting throughout, and a new HVAC system. So
And Cher, was this from a wholesaler, like, or how did you find this deal?
this deal was from a wholesaler. Mhm.
Gotcha. So did a wholesaler just like have you on his buyers list and he just sent you an email? How did that
So
work?
what wholesalers start doing when you start selling these properties is they start stalking you in MLS, and they're going to look up your company name and start reaching out to you.
Ooh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And it,
you'll start getting texts and phone calls and emails like, "Oh, I saw you sold a similar property around the corner." And they'll know because it's usually a company that bought it, and then they only owned it for a short period of time. So they'll identify you as a flipper that way, back into it that way, and then reach out to you to send you potential deals.
and is it
Mm.
competitive? Because I imagine that the wholesaler is going to try to like, get as much money from you as possible. So how do you negotiate with the wholesaler?
Absolutely. So I don't like negotiating with wholesalers because I feel like it's a racket. Um, they give many times what I'll see is I'll see the same deal from five different wholesalers at five different prices,
Wow.
and they could be anywhere between a 20 to $100,000 price difference. The ones that are marking it up, because what wholesalers deal is they work with other wholesalers, so they may have three wholesalers on a deal. I find out from the very beginning if it's a direct lead. If it's not a direct lead, I don't want to deal with it, because
Right,
that means I'm paying you and I'm paying somebody else, and that means I'm not getting a real deal.
right. That's
True.
true.
Okay.
So what you want to do is, as gain these relationships with different wholesalers, is to identify the ones that have the direct relationship with the seller. If it's not a direct relationship, what ends up happening is, you may think you're about to be under contract, and then somebody else swipes in with a higher number and you're out of there thinking, you were about to be under contract. So I just think, wholesaling is one of those deals where people aren't licensed. It's not a regulated field, so they can kind of do whatever they want to do. And, it's like not everyone holds the same set of morals that you and I may hold. So it's just tricky.
True.
If I could avoid working with wholesalers, I would. I prefer stuff right off of MLS, or, different owners that have just reached out to me based on signage or online presence or what have you. Those tend to be cleaner deals. I mean, I had one wholesale deal that I bought out in Accokeek for $100,000, and when we got to the settlement table, I saw that the wholesaler was making $60,000 in wholesale deal. I'm
Mm.
like, he's going to make more money than I make over 6 months renovating this property and dealing with the headache. Maybe I'm in the wrong business.
Right. Right. I got it. So the one in Wardolph, he reached out to you, and then you, I guess, kind of verified that he was dealing with the direct seller, and then
Yes, I mean, that's the first question I ask, are you dealing directly with the seller? And he's like, absolutely. And if I make you an offer today, could we ratify the contract today? Yes, absolutely. If they start hemming and hawing and like, well, no, then like something's up. They probably don't really have the direct lead. Um, or it could just be a complicated wholesale situation too, but most of the time it's just not a direct lead.
gotcha. And then so he quoted you a price of 285, or did he quote you a higher price and you
He
had to?
quoted me a higher price. I believe the initial price was like 315, and I talked him down to 285. He had been trying to sell the property for quite a while, so it's not surprising that he was willing to come down in price. They still walked away with like a $30,000 profit, so I think
Mm.
they did well for themselves. They were happy. We were happy. We were still able to make a profit off of it.
Mhm.
But in this particular deal, just by line, I want to just make sure you understand the different categories and why they're so important. With the acquisition on this at 285 and the construction reserve, and with the reserve contingency was built in, that 15% that we talked about was included in that $40,000. Now, the other things you want to think about is you do have to pay for transfer and recordation tax. So on this particular property, that's $2,910.
Mhm.
We had to pay a estimated settlement cost and closing costs, which was $1,275. We also had to get title insurance, which was $1,344. We had to do the title search and the location survey, which was $195 and $550, and then the attorney doc prep. So the next one that's bolded in orange, the commitment fee, that's the upfront 1% that I was talking about in the beginning to the hard money lender.
Right.
So the 1% is of the total loan value. So that 285 plus the 40,000 ends up being $325,000 total loan. So 1% of that is 3,250. So once I signed the loan commitment letter, I had to write a check for the $3,250 for them to start the loan process. The lender 2 points, the additional 2 points, because remember I said the lender charges a total of 3 points. So that part highlighted in the yellow, that $6,500 is not due until we get to the settlement table.
Right.
And under that, the construction inspections at $200, 3 at $200 total, $600 total for the project. So that's the next line item. And then the BPO, or the inspection, initial inspection that's done up front, is $200. So that's an additional fee. So the checks that you're writing up front are that $3,250, and then the title search fee that they charge you, and I believe that was $250. And then no, it was $150. Title review up front is $150. And then the inspection fee, which they charge $200 for. So you have to add up those things to have that money readily available for the very first part of applying for the loan. And then the rest of these monies will be due at closing. So in this pro forma, I built in staging after the fact. Or did I? No, I didn't have staging. This is the one I didn't stage up front, actually.
Oh.
And then earnest money deposit was $3,250, and the title review was $150, as we discussed. So utilities and miscellaneous fees. So we had some crazy thing happen on this particular property where utilities were off the hook in terms of costs, like the Pepco and water bill and all of that. So it ended up being way above the projected amount of utilities that we thought we were going to be paying. So that $9,000 is included in there. We added that after the fact because the initial pro forma had like a $4,000 utility carrying cost over 3 to 6 months. And now if you go down to line lender points, you know, the $1,800, this is the second lien hard money lender. So he's charging us a different set of fees for less amount of money. I believe I can't remember the exact amount, but let's say we borrowed $20,000 for him. So these were the fees that we were going to be charged from the secondary lender.
Is he
And
considered
now,
like a gap lender? Because I guess he's kind of funding the gap between what the first lien, what the first lender is giving you, right?
so not necessarily. In this particular case, it wasn't gap lending because he's actually paying for just the holding costs. And the holding costs are going to be paid over time. With the gap lending, it would be someone that was coming out of pocket and actually going to cover these upfront costs for us. So if you take all of the orange highlighted numbers, like that, they would be covering that money for us upfront with gap lending.
Okay.
This particular secondary lender was really covering, I mean, he was a hard money lender, but he was just a second lien position. And he was covering the carrying cost on the deal. So he didn't make a huge profit off of this, but he was a more conservative investor, and this is how he preferred to participate in investment deals. But that's, like I said up front, like it really depends on your comfort level. Some people like to start as like smaller hard money lenders, or they do gap lending for higher interest rate and maybe make a couple $1,000s off of a deal. And then after they've gotten their feet wet, then they're like, okay, well, we'll come in and we'll put $30,000 into the deal, but it's not a hard money loan. They'd just be getting a percentage of the profit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an option as well. With the total upfront fees, as you can see at the $6,850. So if you were using a gap lender, they could have loaned you that $6,850 to get to closing. And then if the secondary closing fees, they could have helped you with that as well. So really, it all depends how you're using the gap lending. Some people may use one person to cover the initial, fees, that $6,850, and they may roll in the carrying costs as well, which then it would be gap lending. It would be really a combination of like hard money and gap lending all at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I
So
can imagine over time you've kind of built up like a list of your hard money lenders and gap lenders and everything. Do you is it like, how do you determine who to go with? I guess you kind of look at the rates and stuff.
I look at the rates, but I also look at the relationship and the ease of working with someone as well, because I wouldn't say that my hard money lender is the cheapest hard money lender out there. But I do enjoy working with him. I think he's easy to work with. He's easy to reach. Sometimes you work with people, they're not so easy to work with. You can't get in touch with them. The timelines, it may take longer to close. So I've used quite a bit of hard money lenders across, along the years. And I think it's just been most successful using this particular lender.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So finalizing in the pro forma, if you look at the total investment from the private lender and the investor, $325,000, and then the total that is going to be due at closing is $339,274. So that's going to include all of the closing costs as well. And then you go to the profitability analysis and you look at the after renovated value. So we projected this to sell for $429,000, which it did. And then the lender investor payoff, if you look at and you deduct that, that's $325,000. Mm-hmm. So the major cost though in all of this is going to be your closing costs and then your agent fees, and if you have any seller subsidy. So the rule of thumb, and now everybody's pro forma is going to be different. I'm very conservative with my numbers because I like to be surprised and make more money than I think I'm going to make. I mean, it might be a mind game that I play with myself, but it works. So when you're doing those numbers though, I like to use the general rule of 13%. 13% is going to include like your transfer and recordation taxes, title fees, agent fees, and a seller subsidy. In certain markets, that 13%, maybe 10%. Like in DC, for example, you don't really have to worry about seller subsidy as much. And honestly, right now in this market, you don't see a ton of seller subsidy because it's a seller's market. So you could change that to 10% and still feel comfortable about it. But as you research certain markets, like when you're in that $200,000 to $400,000 price point, many times within this real estate market, prior to this like major boom we have going on, most buyers were requesting anywhere between 2 and 3% in seller subsidy. So I went ahead and I built that into the pro forma. Now, if we didn't have to give it to them, wonderful. Now we're gaining another 2-3% in profit. But I put it out there anyway, just to, be conservative. And then if you can see, that's a $42,900 that's eating into the overall profit. So that number is a very big number that you want to pay attention to within your pro formas as you build, as you build that. We're right here, actually, right
Mhm.
42.
Yep.
So you deduct all those numbers, 325 and the 42.9, your total profit is 25,957. So call it a $26,000 profit
Right.
for a 3-month project, and not a bad deal. You know, you're talking about 25 grand, you're happy. You're paid off your investors. Everybody's good to go.
Awesome.
So this is, I mean, it's not an awesome deal, but it's a solid deal, you know.
Yeah, I say that.
Some
Yeah,
deals,
yeah, I
some
say
deals you walk away with 75 grand. I mean, those are awesome deals. And then some deals you just hold your breath and you break even and you're just glad you didn't take a loss.
absolutely.
So luckily, like out of most of my projects, I've had 2 break-even deals and I had 1 loss. And my first loss last year, and it was very sad, but I got over it.
You're great at what you do, though. You're great at what you do.
Yeah. So with that loss, as you look back out on it, like what was it that went wrong?
So, you know what? It just, everything that could go wrong in a project went wrong in the project. This is the project that the tree fell on. This is the project that the actual HVAC system got stolen from. This, I mean, just like anything that you could think of that went wrong with this project. I mean, it was beautiful in terms of land and the total, you know, the renovation was gorgeous and everything. I think it was priced to sell. But it was a unique property too, because it was in Accokeek and it had a walkover bridge on an acre of land. So it was one of those things where we thought, okay, this is cute, a walkover bridge, it's picturesque, this is going to be amazing. And then people were like, wait, there's too far of a walk from the driveway to walk over the bridge to get to the front door. You got to build a drive over bridge. Well, a drive over bridge is $15,000, so that ate into the profit. And the first buyer, you know, the financing fell through. We kept extending the contract so that, you know, we were paying monthly on that. We had a second offer. Same thing happened. Their financing fell through. That was another 3 months added on. So we ended up holding the property for way longer than we should have. I mean, we got close to the projected price, but the holding and carrying costs and the bridge and all the other stuff that happened just ate into our profit significantly, which ended up making it a loss. So,
I see. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I see.
But trust me, I learned so much from losing on that one. I will never make the same mistakes again.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
So any questions on the
Deal flow? So basically, you just kind of, you know, get deals from wholesalers, or I mean, also you get sometimes, you know, situations where you find someone that wants a direct seller. But
so honestly, the best deals I've had is from literally stalking, you know, the realtor database on MLS. I find areas where, you know, my buyers are actually looking and they're hot areas, and I'm like, oh, this is a hot area. Days on the market here are really low. I mean, you know, my buyers are looking to buy in this area. I need to look into this. So then I'll start looking on deals on, you know, just the MLS and start analyzing those deals. And it may take me 10, 15 deals before I get one deal that works. You know, I think that that's the thing with some of my investors, you know, I like that have wanted to do projects with me before we did our first project together. They're like, oh my gosh, Sherry, you've done like 30 pro formas and we haven't pulled the trigger yet. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's how it works sometimes. You got to, you know, there's a lot of back end work, but you don't want to just jump into a deal just to get into a deal. Like the numbers have to make sense. You want to be able to resell this property. You just don't want to get, sometimes the numbers make sense, but then you look at, you know, the days on the market and you're like, but I might have to hold this deal for 3 months before I sell it. That's going to cost me more money. So, you know, I'll pass on deals like that. So it's just, it's a matter of being able to really utilize, MLS and know what the hot areas are, and take those deals and plug them into the pro forma and see if they work. I think, it's great that way for me because I'm a realtor, so I can get 2 sets of commissions as well, on the acquisition, on the initial acquisition, and then on the resale. And then of course the profit from the flip.
That's awesome. Okay. Wow. Well, I was thinking that to get the best deals, it needs to be off market, but it sounds like you're able to find good deals right on the MLS. That's excellent. Okay.
Yeah, because the other good place to find deals are auctions. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well in the presentation. Auctions are a great way to find deals.
Cool.
Sarah, where we go? That was the next one. See, you're way ahead of me. So MLS, I think establishing relationships, and I shouldn't tell you this because I'm a realtor, so of course I want you to work with me, but I actually do think on the investor side, it's great to have multiple realtors that you're working with. Because, even though I'm a realtor, I still have realtors that I work with that, have access to not hard money, but to off-market deals or listings before they hit the market, and they know that I flip, so they'll reach out to me, and then I don't have a problem paying them a commission. Where it gets dicey with me, though, being an agent, is that if they bring me the deal, they won't get the out sale of the deal rather than if they were working with a regular investor. They may get that initial, commission, and then once it's been renovated, they may get the out sale commission. Versus with me, I want to sell my own stuff, so they may only get that initial commission on the initial acquisition. But working with multiple agents that are constantly sending you deals, and especially if you work with agents that actually know how to do an initial analysis, like a quick analysis, and say, okay, I know this is a hot area, I know this is a good deal, take a look at it, and then you can just plug it into your pro forma after reviewing their comps. Then if you have a handful of agents that you work with like that, I think it would be super beneficial to you, because you can always have some eyes and ears out there. And when you're working with agents that are actually working with buyers, they know where the hot areas are to focus on are.
That's excellent. Excellent. I don't know if Kyrie told you that he wants to, right now, of course, we're focusing on private money lending, right? Mm-hmm. But eventually, we both want to get into rental properties and everything. And
absolutely.
Kyrie has been looking and interested in Hagerstown, or, just these areas where it's a little bit lower. But with that, with working with people, working with multiple agents, but then how do you get around the thing where agents want to kind of, be exclusive? They want you, or is it that, I guess you set up an agreement where for the properties that they bring you?
Absolutely.
Is that
yeah.
Okay.
And and they would understand that an agent that works with investors knows that an investor is not going to just be working with one agent. It's different when it's your principal residence, right? You're going to sign in that an agreement, and you're going to work with that person until you find that particular property. But when you're looking for properties to flip, your agent will understand, and they will allow that addendum to the agency agreement.
Gotcha. Now, Cher, currently right now, a lot of people are predicting that the real estate market is going to have some type of correction. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine that right now, a lot of real estate investors are not really eager to buy properties because they fear that the market is going to go down. How do you feel about that?
Well, I haven't seen that in the market at all. I've seen quite the opposite of that. I'm live and in all of it, so I'm constantly competing with other investors to acquire properties. Okay. It's always a multiple offer situation. It has actually gotten worse since March when COVID hit. It's because interest rates are at an all-time low, and there's so many buyers that are looking to buy instead of rent. It's everyone is looking now to flip a property. So, there's not enough inventory out there right now. For every property that I make an offer on, there may be anywhere between 5 and 10 offers. I had a listing last week. It had 42 offers on this listing. I've never even seen anything like that before. So with it being a seller's market, I think smart investors are like, wait, there's not enough inventory. Let me create inventory. And I can bump up the price right now because people can afford more with a less interest rate, and they're willing to do that because the market is so competitive.
Mhm.
So I think investors are just riding this out until the wheels fall off. And I don't know. I mean, I don't have the crystal ball, but I don't feel like interest rates are going to skyrocket anytime soon. Yeah. So getting back to deal searching, of course, off-market deals, we talked about wholesalers, and for people who don't know what wholesalers do, they basically could do a range of stuff from marketing, themselves, and saying that we buy properties cash. You may see signs like that, or that you may get a flyer in the mail where it says something similar. We'll buy your house. We can close in 10 days, that kind of thing. And all that person is really doing is getting you under contract and then shopping your property for a higher price to probably somebody like me that's looking to flip a property. So, there's tons of wholesalers out there. Some of them are lovely. Some of them are kind of scammy. So you got to, build those relationships and know who you're working with. You should never give money to a wholesaler. Everything should happen at the settlement table. That's where they should get paid. If they're asking for money up front, it's a scam.
Mhm.
So you just, it's like once you get into the game, you'll start establishing relationships, and you'll get referrals from other investors to wholesalers they use and stuff like that. So you just want to kind of narrow it down and figure out who are those good people to work with. And if you can get referrals early on, when you first start doing that, even better.
Mm. Have you ever thought about wholesaling?
It's a conflict of interest for me. So, it's like, because it's like, I can't say that I'm a real estate broker and I charge a fee for commission, but then I'm charging you a wholesale fee too. It would be kind of shady to do that. I mean, it's not illegal, but I find it to be highly unethical.
Mm.
Yeah. So another great place to find deals is probate attorneys, bankruptcy attorneys, and then real estate attorneys like that are handling actual estate sales. And of course, divorce attorneys, because they have leads, because they know when people are getting divorced, right? They're going to have to sell their property or maybe buy new properties. Same thing with probate attorneys. Somebody has passed, so the family may need to get rid of that particular property. So they're a great source of leads if you have established relationships with, any of these types of attorneys. Of course, mailers are a great way to start out. You can focus on certain neighborhoods and focus on absentee homeowners. You can look that up through the realtor database, but I think there's other databases that you can access that information with, because if the person isn't living in the property, it may be a rental property that they want to unleash at some point, or maybe it's a vacant property and they just want to get rid of it. So you can strike a good deal uh, by sending out mailers. Some people respond to them, some people don't, but you kind of have to take different stabs at it. If you do decide, you're actively looking for new inventory, and with a competitive market like this, you're not always going to find it through MLS or wholesalers. So you have to be creative. Tax auctions are a great way. Some people stop tax auctions because you may just have to pay the tax liens on the property in order to get the property. So for example, like let's say property has $50,000 in delinquent taxes, but it's worth $150,000. Well, you pay off that $50,000 and own the property. So you automatically are walking into a deal with equity, and you can flip that property. So you make money on, the front end and the back end.
Mm.
So tax auctions are great. Regular just real estate auctions are great. Like Alice Cooper Auctioneers is a local real estate auction. Ashland Auction in Maryland is a great place. Zoom, which is spelled XOME.com. That's a great place to look at auctions. So if you Google online real estate auctions, I'm sure you'll, come up with a lot of different options. They do have some, extra fees attached to auctions. So you do want to watch out for, $3,000, $5,000 fee, because you want to build those into your pro forma as well. Investment groups, if you are part of like a meetup community, there are different investment groups on there. I've met a lot of cool people and shared, different ideas on there at different events. I mean, I know it's different now because of COVID, but I'm sure people are doing Zooms and stuff for meetups, like investor meetups. I think that's a great way to not only meet other investors, but meet wholesalers and, hard money lenders and stuff, because everybody kind of shows up to share different ideas. So that's a great way too. Going down to the probate office in each of the different states, whether it's DC, Maryland, or Virginia, if you have the time to do that, or if you have time to hire somebody and go through the different, I know it's kind of morbid, but go through the deaths every week and see who has property that they would potentially want to dispose of, then, that's another opportunity. And of course, just local classified. Sometimes you can get on Craigslist or online and people are selling their properties for sale by owner, or, just different ways like that. And they're not necessarily listed with a real estate agent. So some fun facts. So Maryland, the average house listing price for flipping, this is not just in general. So I don't want you to go back and research and say, sure, actually the price is $550. This is just for flipping. Average house listing for flipping is about $369. And then the average amount of time it takes to flip is 198 days, which is a little over 6 months. So but the average profit is awesome. It's about $109,000 on average profit. So the ROI on that is well over 100%. In Virginia, it's a little bit lower in terms of listing price, about $341 for flip properties, and the average time is just above the 6-month period, which is 184 days, but the average profit is right at about 91,000 and the ROI at about 99%. So I don't think you can go wrong with Maryland or Virginia. We didn't have any stats on DC, unfortunately. I'm not sure why. But DC is a great place to flip. It's just you got to find the right deal, because so many people are flipping in DC. The margins are tighter. I started out flipping in DC, and I have moved out to Maryland, different parts of Maryland, PG, Charles County, and Baltimore City, because it's just like, why would I pay this much money for a property that, now it's a higher liability and I'm making a less of a profit, where I can go out to, surrounding areas and acquisition is lower, construction's lower, and my profit margin is much higher. So I am not married to any set place. I am all about the numbers. So the next step is just getting pre-approved for a loan, by a bank or hard money lender, or confirming the cash you may have on hand, whether that's in your bank account, IRA, or whatever. And then just start looking at properties. I think the best way to learn is just to, actually go and look. So you can start looking, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, with contractors and start getting a feel of what things will cost. And I'm not saying, go look at 100 properties and have a contractor go 100 times, because he'll hate you. But your top 3 properties that you're thinking about making an offer on definitely would make a lot of sense. And, you can learn more that way. And once you've identified a property, you want to make sure you pull the comps, or you have an agent pull the comps for you to make sure you can plug in the right numbers into your pro forma. And then, of course, if the numbers work, now you're ready to make an offer. So, and then that's about it. I mean, I do consulting services in terms of flipping. So if you need assistance with renovation planning or project management, Even if it's something as simple as financial projections, I can assist with that. If you want help hiring contractors, I can certainly help you with that. I have, some developers that hire me to pick all the finishes within their flips because, they know that I work with buyers and sellers and I know what they like. So they're like, okay, go ahead and pick it for me. I'll pay you to do that. And it could be something as simple as market and research analysis. I can assist with that. Or just if you wanted to partner on an investment deal like we are, I can do that. So that pretty much sums it up. This is Evelyn and Carlos's information if you wanted to reach out to them directly. And of course, you guys have my information already. But this was Flipping 101.
Love it. Love it.
For sure. Thank you.
This is great. This is great. And great timing too, as we move into doing that Mount Rainier project. Any updates about that, when the closing will be? Or?
No, I reached out to the title company today and left them a message. They're just waiting to clear some liens that are on the current property. So as soon as they do that, we'll be ready to go. Like we're ready. We're just waiting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also, what about that syndication that you were kind of thinking about and planning?
What was that? What syndication?
Well, it was an email you sent out about a syndication. It was just kind of like you just kind of putting out feelers for a syndication. You remember? You don't remember? It was like an email. It was like and you asked if like people would be kind of interested in it, and you just kind of. I emailed you back, and I was like, hey, and you kind of.
Oh, about that big project in Baltimore. Yeah. So that was a larger scale project. So we really would have had to raise about $1.5 million, which, we found out about the actual auction just 3 weeks before we put that whole presentation together. So it just didn't give us enough time to raise the funds to be able to participate in the auction. But we're actively looking at a lot of more deals like that because, as you can imagine, that whole assisted living facility population is just growing tremendously. And there's a wait list in most states, for the elderly to get into those facilities. So it's high demand for that type of project. We just need to look, keep finding deals like that make sense where the numbers make sense.
Gotcha. And what would you say would be the advantages of doing a syndication rather than just these like short-term flips?
So, it's the numbers, right? Like you just have the profit margin is just way more substantial. In that deal, like let's say you did have $1.5 million to put into that deal, potentially over 24 to 36 month period, you would have been paid out your 1.5 million plus a $3 million profit. Wow. I would wait 24 to 36 months for
that. That's awesome.
So, yeah.
That's excellent. Cher, this has been really great. We really appreciate you. We have final four. Go ahead, Kyrie. What was that?
I said a lot of great information. I'm just so thankful, and I appreciate you for just taking your time out your, busy days. I know you're busy.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Yes. This is awesome. All right, so our final four questions. Number one is, let me see. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay, here it is. All right. So number one, your current favorite real estate book or podcast?
So, it was my most recent book is probably going to be the Millionaire Real Estate Investor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think that has like a lot of good nuggets in there. So yeah, that would be my pick.
Awesome. And what would you say is your favorite business book or podcast?
Never Eat Alone. Have you read that book?
No.
It's an awesome book. It's my favorite business book. Never Eat Alone.
Okay, awesome. Is it about like networking and the power of networking?
It is. Yeah, it's all about relationships and how you build your business with relationships. A lot of times people don't think about, they're thinking about just numbers or, whatever, but it's really about building rapport with people and them and sharing the information, you know, from one person to another, which is networking.
Wow, awesome, awesome. Number 3 is, what hobbies do you have?
What hobbies do I have? Well, I love to work out.
Cool.
So, you know, that's probably my favorite thing to do right now. And well, no, not favorite. My favorite thing to do is cook. My second favorite thing to do is work out.
Cool, cool. And the 4th question is, what do you think sets apart successful real estate investors from all those who give up, fail, or never get started?
That is a good question. I think the most important thing that would set you apart is the ability to adapt to each market, because every market is going to be different. So how do how do you adapt in terms of the way that you make an offer, the way that the type of lending that you use, the types of crews that you use, the types of pro formas you may put together? But you do need to have flexibility, because not only may you have different markets within one big overall market, like even though this is the DMV, there's still Mount Rainier, there's still Southeast DC, and each market may be different. So the flexibility to adapting in those markets is going to be really key. And then as the market changes, like, you have to adapt to that, because when it goes from being a seller's market to a buyer's market, what are you going to do differently as the developer, as the flipper, to accommodate, you know, those new types of buyers?
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Love that, love that. Excellent. All right, Cher. Wow, we went over 2 hours. This is amazing. Time flies.
Too long.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, Cher. We really
Absolutely, my pleasure. I hope you guys learned something, and if you need anything from me, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm happy to help.
awesome, awesome. All right, have a great night.
Okay,
See
you
you later.
too.
All right, bye.
Bye.